In the 6th century, the global landscape was defined by massive, organized empires. The Roman Empire controlled vast territories through military force and a strict, heavily enforced social hierarchy. To the east, the Persian Empire matched them in scale, maintaining order through a rigid system, where absolute authority was concentrated in a small ruling class. Between these two powers lay the Arabian Peninsula. Protected by harsh deserts and rugged mountains, it remained independent and isolated from foreign conquest, but it functioned without a centralized legal system. Without an overarching state to establish courts or enforce rules, the region operated under a lack of formal legal structure. Order was dictated by tribal strength, a reality where safety was guaranteed only by the number of swords a group could field. This era, known as Jahiliyyah, was characterized by a sharp paradox. Tribes prided themselves on hospitality and loyalty, yet they were frequently locked in multi-generational warfare over minor disputes. For the vulnerable populations, life was precarious. Some families, driven by economic fear or a specific sense of social shame, practiced female infanticide, burying their newborn daughters in the sand. Widows were often treated as inherited property. Custom dictated they spend a year in isolated squalor, denied basic hygiene, and treated as cursed objects rather than individuals with rights. Tribal raids, theft, and extortion were considered legitimate avenues for economic gain. If a tribe was strong enough to seize a caravan or a well, they owned it. Religious practices at the time were largely focused on ancestral habit. The Kaaba was filled with idols, but this worship was disconnected from any shared moral code or ethical accountability. This was a society where the weak had no recourse against the strong, leaving the region without a mechanism for internal justice. Before his prophethood, a specific event challenged this status quo. A merchant from the Zubayd tribe came to Mecca to sell goods. A powerful elite named As bin Wa'il took the merchandise, refused to pay, and abducted the merchant's daughter. The merchant appealed for help at the Kaaba. Because he was an outsider without a powerful tribe to protect him, the existing system offered him no way to reclaim his family or property. Muhammad was among a small group of young men who decided to intervene. They bypassed tribal politics and confronted As bin Wa'il at his home. Faced with this unified group, the warlord surrendered the daughter and the stolen goods. The merchant was able to leave Mecca with his family intact. This pact, the Hilf al-Fudul, established a new precedent that justice for an individual should take priority over the political power of a tribal leader. When Muhammad began preaching at age 40, his message of social equality directly challenged the Meccan power structure. It proposed replacing a hierarchy based on tribal lineage with a community based on shared ethical standards. The response from Meccan leadership was physical violence. In one instance, while the prophet was praying, a local leader named Abu Jahl ordered the heavy remains of a slaughtered camel dumped onto his back to humiliate and pin him. Figures like Abu Lahab led a campaign of public harassment and character assassination. The Meccan elite eventually moved to a social and economic boycott, attempting to starve the movement by cutting off all trade and communication. The opposition eventually shifted to psychological tactics. Opponents sought out sorcerers to use black magic, attempting to induce physical illness and mental distress. Historical records mention a specific plot involving a sorcerer named Lubayd bin Asim. He took hair from the prophet's comb, tied it into knotted strings, and hid them at the bottom of a well to cause illness. Despite physical assault, economic isolation, and psychological attacks, the movement persisted. The prophet's endurance indicated that this new framework of justice could not be dismantled by the tactics of the old system. After the migration to Medina, the prophet began implementing these principles on a larger scale. He established formal brotherhoods between rival groups, replacing tribal warfare with a unified social contract. The economic landscape changed as the prophet introduced fair trade laws. He broke up existing monopolies and enforced financial protections for the poor and orphans, ensuring that wealth was not concentrated solely among tribal elites. A unified legal code was established. For the first time in the region, the law applied equally to tribal leaders and commoners alike, removing the legal immunity previously enjoyed by the powerful. In place of retaliatory raids and blood feuds, The Prophet established a system where trade and social conduct were governed by a consistent, shared set of rules. This moral framework was tested following the conflict at Khaybar. A woman named Zainab bint al-Harith plotted to assassinate the Prophet by serving him poisoned meat during a meal. The Prophet tasted the meat and immediately realized it was tainted. However, his companion, Bish, had already swallowed his portion and died from the venom. In the era before this reform, an assassination attempt resulting in the death of a companion would lead to an immediate massacre of the opposing tribe, sparking a new cycle of vengeance. When the assassin was caught and confessed, the Prophet chose not to pursue a retaliatory execution. Instead, he granted her personal forgiveness, prioritizing restraint over the traditional cycle of revenge. The Prophet Muhammad did more than change a government. He replaced a culture of arbitrary power with a system based on enforceable justice, transitioning a society from the rule of force to the rule of law.